Hello and welcome to another episode of 1000 Actually Fun Books, where we are looking for the best of fun escapist books. So I'm going to review a book called The Book of Doors by Gareth Brown today. This is a magical realism, so it would fall into the fantasy category. The book's plot is that, and I'm going to do this review without spoilers, is that there are magical books in the world. And the books each individual book does something else. It basically gives its user, its holder, a special power. And there's all sorts of variety. We don't get all of them, but some of them, for example, give healing, or give speed, or do other things. You could just think of a litany of things, however creative the author could be on what these books do. And what you have are book hunters, people who really want them, and sometimes they get them in legitimate ways, buy them or inherit them or something along those lines. And sometimes they get them through illegal, criminal, evil ways, right? But there's a bunch of people who want these books. So the plot of the story is our main character, Cassie, comes into contact with one of these special books. It is the Book of Doors, which its main power is it can connect doors. So for example, if you imagine a door in your mind, and then you open, your closet door, and instead of the inside of your closet, you see whatever is outside of, as if you just open the door you're imagining. So as long as you have a picture of a door, then you can open it from any other door in the world. So that's basically how this book works. And so she gets this, and other people are after her because of this book. So that's kind of, in a really brief, very simple nutshell about this book. It is a long, convoluted, very twisty story. And the author does a great job with his plot. In fact, this is a book that's definitely very plot heavy, and that's what you would want to read it for. The world building with the books is interesting because they keep coming up with interesting new books. They keep discovering them as you go along. I gave you only a very brief number of books, but there's a lot of others doing a lot of creative things. And so that keeps the magical system very interesting. As you go along, somebody briefly comes up with this book, and you're like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder how they could use that. And then they use it in some way or use it in a different way, and you're like, interesting, I wonder. Anyway, it just makes you kind of think about it. So I liked the world building, and I really liked the plot. The story kind of starts out, I wasn't sure I was going to like it, but the farther on into the book I got, the more interesting it got as it went along. I will say the pacing is a little bit, I wouldn't say bad, but I would say different. The author breaks this novel up into several parts. I don't remember, 5, 7, something like different sections. And the first section is kind of slower paced because you're getting to know the situation, getting to know your characters and the circumstances and the setup, right? For a bunch of different characters that are going to pop up in the story. And then part 2 is Cassie has discovered what the book is doing, and the pace really ramps up. She is using the book, and other people are trying to either get it or talk with her, or some things are happening, and just a lot of fast pace going along. And then part 3 comes to a dead standstill, basically drops off a cliff as far as your pacing goes. And it's this really laid back, relaxed, you can sit back and twiddle your thumbs as you just casually meander through that section of the story. And then in part 4, it picks back up, and towards the end of the book, it's ramped way up. So the pacing is kind of interesting on that respect. It does fit the story. But I will say, it is not the pacing of a Hollywood movie. In fact, it does some things in this book with the tropes that it has, which I'm not going to give you spoilers on, that I don't think I've ever seen a book do things in this particular way. Part 3 really surprised me on how the author handled the situation. And I really liked that. I really liked that it was just so surprising. I was telling my husband, I'm like, I don't believe I've ever seen an author handle this particular problem this way. So I liked that. Even if it did end up having slow pacing in that one section of the book. I would say that this would be a great book that would really make you converse with somebody else. Like if you had a book club or you have a best friend that you enjoy talking with books about, this would be a good book for that. It has a lot of points that are really like good conversational starters. Like, how would you handle if you had the Book of Doors, as one example? How would you handle dealing with that? What would you do if in these circumstances? Or what would be a better solution for handling the bad guys? Or whatever. I mean, there's just a lot to talk about as far as this book goes. So I think that that would make a really interesting book for a group to read this. I did not love all the characters. The characters, it was one of the things right at the beginning of the book, I'm just like, I'm not connecting with these characters. I'm not liking them. And some of them stayed the same, but there was definitely some character growth in the characters. And by the end of the story, I wouldn't say I loved the characters. This is not a book where it's character driven, and nor is it a book that I would feel like if they did a sequel, I wouldn't be dying to get back into reading about the characters. I would be interested in reading a book set in the world. The world building was interesting enough, and the plot was interesting enough that if the author did another book, I'd be like, oh, that would probably make for probably be a good book, well plotted out. But the characters didn't resonate with me. Having said that, though, the character growth did help a lot. This book was satisfying in the ending. This is a standalone novel, not part of a series, and it felt very good conclusion, happily ever after for our main characters, and that is a good feeling. So I like books like that. Okay, on to the things I didn't like, the other hand. So there were definitely some things I didn't like. The big thing that I would give you a caveat, the warning for reading this book would be the gore level, the violence level in this book. It doesn't start out feeling like it will be that bad, but our main bad guy, there are two of them. But one of them really, really, really likes to torture people. Like, she gets pleasure from this. And the author spends a little bit too much time describing it, and it's really kind of gross. Now, that's not a big part of the story, but it's very much there. And people die in horrible ways multiple times in this book. And I didn't really like that, okay? It was just too much pain and cruelty to really enjoy that aspect of the book. So if you don't like torture, reading about torture, that kind of thing in a book, this may be a little hard to get through. You may want to not do it. And this is the reason that I would say this book is not appropriate for a teenager and younger. There's no romance of any kind, so there's nothing like that. I don't even remember, there's a little bit of swearing, but nothing, like that. Instead, it's really the gore that's makes this book too much. Speaking of things being a little bit too much, so we have a character, and this is a minor spoiler. One character has a book called the Book of Memories, and you can use it to take away memories from other people. And he chooses to use this book on somebody who doesn't want him to take away the memories. And it feels very violating. Like, she is crying and saying, "No, don't do this to me. I feel awful. Don't do this." And he's like, "I'm sorry, I've got to do this to you," this kind of thing. And it really comes across a little bit too much assault vibes going on. I will say it turns out okay in the end, but the time when it's happening in the book is, again, it kind of edges onto too much of the way it's written. So again, if that's a little bit uncomfortable for you, this may not be your book. There are a couple other things that I didn't like. One is there's the only mention of Christians are a very deliberately derogatory, mocking couple of sentences. I didn't really appreciate that. It's only a couple of sentences though, maybe, you know, a paragraph and a half throughout the whole book, not a big deal, but it was unnecessary and can be offensive. There is an explanation for where these magical books come from. I did not find it satisfying. Some other people may read this and think it was very clever and original and interesting. It just didn't work for me. I think I would have liked it better if they'd just been mysteriously there rather than have an explanation that's kind of weird. So there is that. Those are a little bit minor, but it is there. So overall though, I did enjoy this book. It was a complicated as far as the plot goes, which was really very intriguing to see how it all resolves. There are some things about it that I didn't love. The way that the author decided to resolve it was not necessarily, like, there were a lot of options on how the author could have ended up getting the bad guy. And the one that the author chose is kind of like, this is not the most obvious way to do this. It was kind of a little bit, I kept thinking of different ways that they could resolve things using the magical powers that they had access to. And they just didn't end up thinking of it and using it. And that was kind of a little bit irritating. But overall, really engaging book. I do recommend it. I give it 2 thumbs up. I think that this was a good book. It was interesting enough to definitely recommend. All right, well, thank you for watching, and I hope you join me next week.